Welcome to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Listen in each week as we bring you an inspiring person who will share their story, ideas and business techniques to help you create a practice and a life you love. And now introducing your host, Dr. Jesse Green.
Hello everyone, it's Jesse Green here. Welcome back to SavvyDentist.com and to the Savvy Dentist podcast. It's really wonderful to have you company for another episode of the show. And this episode is part of our summer series. And during this summer series, what we're doing is we're taking the best parts of the best episodes of the Savvy Dentist podcast and pulling them together around particular themes. So this particular episode is themed around leadership. And we know that as business owners, if we want to grow and scale our practice, the ability to work with and through other people is an essential skill that we've got to master. So leadership becomes core to what we've got to do, the skills we've got to develop. And in this particular episode, you're going to hear about a variety of different elements of leadership. You're going to hear about the different challenges that face leaders today. You're going to hear about the different types of leadership voices that you have and how you can channel each of those voices depending on the circumstances. You're going to find out why we do what we do as leaders. We're going to talk about connecting with people at a heart level so that we can work with people at an emotional level, not just at a kind of head level, but really understand who our people are so we can help them achieve what they want, get the best out of them, which of course drives the business further as well. So when it comes to leadership, it is a bit of a fallacy that leaders are born and not made. It's not true that they're born. In fact, it's entirely true that leadership is just a skill set. Like any other skill set, it can be learned and it can be mastered. And in this episode, we're going to give you some vignettes which will really provoke some thought. And as always, I hope you take notes on these thoughts, but more importantly, you act on these thoughts so that when you come back from the holiday break, you can set yourself for a great year ahead. We know that if you want to grow and scale your business, leadership is going to be central to that. And I hope this episode gives you a kickstart in that direction for the new year. So without any further ado, here's our summer series on the topic of leadership. How do we extract discretionary effort and how do we make people happy to give it?
And this is where it gets difficult sometimes. As an analytical person, I love to be able to measure things, and it's great to be able to say, how many, how much, and can I monitor it effectively. But if I was to ask you, what's your level of personal care, productivity, passion for the work you're doing at any point in time, you know that it'll fluctuate based on thousands and thousands of different factors that are internal and external. And things as simple as, am I tired? Am I hungry? Impact us. And so the question then is, well, why does it impact us? And part of it's, we have to understand a bit about the human brain. So a lot of that discretionary effort comes from our subconscious drivers. It doesn't come from logic. It doesn't come from reason. It doesn't, very few people think their way to being more passionate about something, right? Even when you say it, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to have to monitor and measure it, you can't be just focused on these tangible things. The most common thing I hear people do is go, cool, I'll give someone a bonus. I'll give them more money. Now, what's really interesting is your subconscious brain doesn't care much about money.
No.
Unless it's not fair. Unless it perceives it's not what it deserves, then it cares a lot. And so we get this sort of, if we're not paying people what they think they deserve, you have a huge impact. But as soon as you hit the fair line, then actually anything else doesn't really add a lot. So what the question is, well, what does that subconscious brain care about? And it cares about things like, am I doing something that's making a difference and worthwhile? Do I have some agency? Do I feel like I'm in control or I have some sort of choice in the matter? And if we just think about those two things, when you're running a practice and you've got, you might be the person doing all of the technical work, those things are really obvious for you and really clear. Whether you're helping a patient to have a better smile or overcome something pretty significant that's going on in their life, and that meaning is really important for you. But when they go outside and talk to the receptionist or, they deal with someone else in your clinic, does that person also feel they're playing a real part in that same piece of work, or do they feel like they're just doing some menial task on the side? Are they doing things because they're important, or are they doing things because you told them to do them? And again, this is where things like that sense of agency, if I'm just doing it because you said so, then why should I care about doing it? Why should I really feel passionate about doing it? And this is some of the, that might sound obvious, but then the signals we send to people when we're working with them and the way we talk about their work and I'll just hurry up and do this, in our moments of frustration and all those other things that go on actually have a really big impact on the subconscious drivers within those people who we're working with. And I don't want to get too sort of woo-woo, but that's just the basic neuroscience behind what drives our actions.
What does the absence of trust look like in a workplace? What sort of things might you observe in a workplace that doesn't have trust? And then I guess the follow-up question will be, how do you engender trust?
Well, it's really a binomial because you can sort of say, well, here's why you don't have trust, and here's what you need to do to have trust. So, for example, when you find that people don't share ideas, it probably means that they don't feel safe. Mm-hmm. They don't feel that they can trust that people will pay attention to them or might laugh at them or might hurt them in one way or the other. When people feel like the people around them can be trusted to listen to your ideas, even if they're not, fully developed. Trusted to that when you ask a question, you're not trying to play gotcha. You're just trying to kind of understand that when you ask for help, you're not worried about the fact that, well, people must think I'm incompetent if I ask a question, but rather I want to ask a question because I'd like to get smarter. That's why I'm asking this question, not because I'm stupid, but because I want to know more. And you can just think about how these things can be seen in different ways. Trust is the basis for what we now talk about as making sure that people feel psychologically safe in the workplace. I mean, it's interesting, the relationship between taking a risk and feeling safe. If you don't feel safe, you can't take a risk. You just won't. You just won't. But if you feel safe, if you feel, you don't have to get it right the first time, if you feel like you can learn, if you feel like you can ask for help, then you're more willing to explore, experiment, put more time and energy into things than you might otherwise do. I know that one of the things that's really difficult is when organizations say, it's like, I want you to innovate, but don't make any mistakes. Well, it's not going to happen. Jess, one of my favorite companies, I'll just tell you this. This is WD-40. I was with them recently, and in their organization, they never make mistakes. Never. No one makes mistakes because their motto is you either win or you learn.
Yeah.
Either win or you learn. Of course they make mistakes, but they don't make mistakes. It's just an opportunity for them to learn. It's
a good reframe, isn't it? It's a really interesting reframe. WD-40, I think, is one of those companies. I don't know much about the organization. I know a lot about the product because it is a magic product, but what about other large organizations? I know you've done a lot of work with Apple and Amazon, and we're going to go back to the W's at one end of the alphabet. We'll go to the other end of the alphabet for a second. You see those companies with they're large, they're massive organizations with complex structures and so on. Is it the same sort of issues? Is it the people issues the same in the size of the organisation such as that? Or is it because people are people, or are there different issues?
I think it's more of the same, but there's scale and scope.
Yeah.
If I've got a team of 5 people, I just have more time and energy for those 5 people than I do for 25 people.
Sure.
Or 50 people. The time is finite. We only have 168 hours a week. So there are some differences. And what I have noticed, I was writing about this today, I was coming up with these little epiphanies, that today uncertainty is certain. That's the reality. And the new normal for us is never normal. And so we have to work actually harder than we have perhaps ever before, or maybe every generation feels this way, but it's true. We have to work harder. It takes more time and energy to be a good leader today than it did when, things were certain. Everybody was in the office all at the same time. There wasn't as much competition. The globe wasn't as big. All those things. Now we often feel 24/7. We're 15 hours. It's your morning, it's my night. It's my night, it's your morning. And yet here we are making a connection. So for all of us, as we aspire to provide leadership, it requires more personal effort. But I think the payoff is tremendous. I know that the best leaders get more out of their people than their counterparts who simply manage.
Yeah. I would like to talk about the 5 gears here, because I think this is going to be a useful framework to think about time, busyness, overwhelm, all those sorts of things that are commonly experienced by small business owners, including dentists.
Yep. The idea of it is it's balanced productivity. So here's the idea. Dentistry is a factory, right? You're trading time for money, and there's certain things that are more valuable than other products.
Yes, that's true.
That people do. And so to be overly productive, so when you're not working, you're not making income. To be overproductive and underpresent is what happens. It actually undermines productivity. So the idea is like, I need to be I need to be on the grindstone. I need just to keep working, right?
Yeah.
So what we've figured out is we actually created a sign language, and I'll teach it to you very quickly. The sign language was basically created when I was trying to drive in London in a left-handed stick shift. And I was driving on the other side of the road, on the other side of the steering, and I was learning how to do it for the first time and shifting left-handed, okay, which is awkward for an American. So I came up with a metaphor to explain to my business partner, Steve Cochran, of what I saw in his life around presence and productivity.
Okay.
So here's the metaphor. The 5 gears, it's a manual stick shift. The ideal is to be automatic when a vehicle shifts for you. So there's 5 gears. The 5th gear is focus mode. 4th gear is task mode. 3rd gear is social. 2nd gear is really going deeper. It's connect mode. 1st gear is recharge. You need every gear every day. What tends to happen to adults over the age of 40 is we get too serious. And we shift into waking up, and the first thing we do is literally look at email. So someone's agenda from the night before will derail us in the morning. And we get into productivity mode very, very quickly. And we go 4, 5, 4, 5, 4, 5, which is task mode. It's root canal. Root canal might be focus mode because I got to really be in the zone.
Yeah.
But then 4th gear, I've got to go in and do paperwork. I've got to sign these documents. I got blah, 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 blah. So you got office work, you have dental work, office, dental, 4th, 5th, 4th, 5th, 4th, 5th. Then you fake 3rd gear, social. Hey, John, good to see you. How's the family? And dentists are really good at that. I mean, they just know how to, typically.
Yeah, it's a performance, right?
Yeah, it's performance. And then, and it's small talk, and that doesn't last long because their mouth is open. They can't talk much anyway. And then you might have a moment of a connect mode with someone in your office and going deeper. Sally, how you doing? What do you need? What's going on? So you connect with them and bond with them maybe a little bit. And then recharge. What is recharge? So how do people recharge? Because all you know is you're done. I finished my day, and guess what? I got another one of those days tomorrow. Yeah. And then another one the next day, and another next day. So what we've done is we've basically figured out language to use at home and at work. At work, well, what does 5th gear look like? Talk about it with the team. What does 4th gear look like? Task. What does 3rd gear look like? Social. 2nd gear, is there ever a need? Is there ever a time for social? Connect mode? Probably not a lot. Recharge. If you're an introvert, go take your lunch in your car. Go on a walk. It's okay. Go recharge for 20, 30 minutes. Whatever you need to do to recharge. But when you get home, this is when the transitions happen and the shifts happen. Because what happens is that our brains stay focused on our 4th, 5th, 4th, 5th, 4th, 5th gear work. Then we have to all of a sudden go home, and we have 4th gear at home. We have tasks at home. I got to take the trash out. I got to pay the bills. And then you might still stay in 5th gear. I got to write a report, or I'm going to do some work, on our financials or whatever. That's 5th gear work at home. But then I've got these kids. What do I do with them? I got a spouse. What do I do with them? So what I figured out for myself and helping Steve too was create a trigger on the way home from work. First, decide what gear you should be in during the day and allow other people to be in the gear. But when you, on your way home, pick a marker on the way home. I pick a bridge. When I get to the bridge, it's about 3 miles from my house. I shift, I stop taking any phone calls or thinking about anything else. And I start thinking about tonight. What are we doing tonight? We have dinner with friends. I'm going to go on a walk with Kelly, my wife. What conversation do I want to have? And I become intentional. When my kids were younger, I would think about, let's create a obstacle course. Let's go do a food fight night. Let's take them to, and I would create, and I had a room. So when I got home, I wasn't addicted to these devices. I stopped 4th and 5th gear.
Yeah, nice.
And between 6 and 9 o'clock, it was 2nd and 3rd gear time.
Yeah, lovely.
And so now we had language. So here's the beautiful part. Instead of nagging when your spouse goes, you're always on your phone, you never listen. Instead of that, we just call plays. Hey guys, hey, no, we're in 3rd gear.
Yeah.
Hey, this is 2nd gear night, date night. Sign language now becomes objective language, not subjective drama.
Yeah.
Because if I nag at you and go, Jesse, you always, you never, versus if I go, hey, dude, it's 3rd gear. Or if I go, hey, I need some recharge time. Then yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
Now we're just calling plays and we're learning to be present and productive at the same time.
Wow. I think that's really powerful.
And also, I understood that we need to be very practical in life, very concrete. I'm not a scientist that will talk about in a deeper way about how each neuron connect with each one or whatever. It's not my area of interest. My area of interest is how that can be applied in a concrete and practical way in our outside world, in the way we connect with each other. For instance, if you want to give you another example.
Yeah.
You know that today to talk about empathy is a must, right? We need to be empathetic and to connect with people, blah, blah, blah. I mean, totally is correct. But I say it in a funny way, okay? Don't get me wrong. That empathy is overrated. And I tell you why. I mean, because in the brain, for instance, empathy and analytical thinking, they compete with each other all the time. So if we are too empathetic, we cannot analyze properly a situation. Therefore, good leaders, I will say successful leaders, they need to know how to balance a right level of empathy with a right level of analytical thinking, and to know how to I will say, dance between the two of them. Tell me if I'm explaining myself.
Perfect.
So I need to be empathetic to connect with my people. I need to be, as a coach, empathetic to understand properly what my clients needs, right? But in one moment, I need to understand to stop that empathy and to start thinking, how can I support and help that person? Because if I stayed in the empathetic side, the only thing I will be able to do is to cry together with you, but not help you.
Yeah.
I don't know if I explained myself. And when I understood this connection, let's say in your profession, of course, I mean, you know that everything around odontology is quite painful, you know, for people. People are, wow, that nobody wants to go to the the dentist. But because it's quite traumatic and we feel, I mean, powerless in a situation when somebody's inside our mouth working, you know, and doing all this now. And then the dentist needs to be empathetic. I mean, to get the confidence and the trust of the patient, of the kid, right? I mean, but in some moment, you need to stop being empathetic. You need to do your work, and your work is quite technical.
Yes.
And if you keep being empathetic, you will not be able to do your work, because you will be just feeling what your patient is feeling and doing nothing. Makes sense what I'm saying?
Yes.
So in life, it's the same. So that's why I just gave you a very concrete example of knowing how the brain works. Now I understand how we need to manage this, I would say, perfect balance between empathy and analytical thinking. So, and this happens and applies in every realm in life.
I wanted to ask you about interactions of a different sort, balancing empathy and analytical as well, and that is in a team situation where as an organization and as the leader of that organization, you have objectives to achieve, you have outcomes that you're trying to attain, and at the same time, we can't do those things entirely on our own. We need to learn how to work with people. We need to learn how to bring a team with us. And I think every business owner I've ever spoken to tells me the hardest thing about running their business is people.
Absolutely.
And sometimes it's ourselves that's the roadblock. Other times it's how we interact with our team or indeed our patients or clients, depending on the industry. But I wanted to ask you about the team dynamic as well, because as the leader of the organization, we set these objectives that we want to achieve. And how do we strike that right balance between being an effective leader and achieving goals, but also managing our team dynamics well enough to feel like we're caring, supportive, and getting that balance right? I sometimes struggle with that.
Well, that is a big struggle for all of us. And this is, you just bang on, you know what I mean? What you're saying is the issue. And what I say is one of the secrets of becoming a good leader. I don't know, let's not use the word good, effective leader. That would be a better word. An effective leader needs really how to build trust that people will, I will not use the word follow. I will say will work in a productive way. Yeah. But at the same time, you need to make decisions. You need to set directions that not necessarily will be what everyone will accept or will understand as the right direction. Make sense? So what I'm trying to say is that balance is so important to understand that I need to learn how to, how to activate one or deactivate it to let the other one come up in such a way that is what characterizes productive and effective leaders. Today, I mean, you know that there are different models of leadership, you know, I mean, let's say more autocratic people that just give orders, I mean, whatever. Today we talk about servant leadership a lot. It's another model. Servant leadership, it doesn't mean a leader that does nothing. It means a leader that will put their team first and will encourage the team to be very proactive and to help, I would say, to take that team to the right place, right? Not making all the decision, because that's not a good leader. So a good leader is the leader that can allow people to arrive to the right decision. And somehow the best leader is a leader that can use coaching techniques, leading people. But again, if you have written in your form, I mean, here in your head, consensus. I will use the word consensus. Let's use the word consensus. I'm totally against of the word consensus because it's impossible. You cannot, make everyone happy.
Yes.
You cannot make everybody happy. This is wrong. This has never happened because people are different. But even though you need to set directions on what will be the best decision for the team, for the organization, for the company, for the benefit of the company. That best decision, I will say, and I will be quite extremist on this, will never, everyone will be happy with that decision. But that's not the point. Maybe people will understand later. So as a leader, you need to learn how to involve everyone, engage everyone, giving their opinion, asking for the proposal. But in some moment, you need to make a decision.
Yeah.
So this is where we need to go. And not waiting that everyone will agree. Because you need to involve everyone. But in one moment, you need to be the one saying, this is the direction, this is where we're going, because it's the best for everyone. And not necessarily everyone will be aligned with this at the beginning. Makes sense what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's the point. That's the point.
I'd like to just explore this concept of developing people a little bit further, because one of the challenges that I know dentists will talk about and face is, but I don't have time, Jesse. And so I'd love to just, A, talk about what you mean by developing people, some practical strategies around that. And B, for those people that are genuinely busy, how do you fit that in? How do you, obviously it's about prioritizing, but how do you practically make that work?
You know, the thing is about a dental practice or a doctor's practice, and you know, I've done some work with doctors. They start off by themselves with some admin, you know, and you know, nurse or hygienist or whatever the case might be. But they're doing this stuff themselves.
Yeah, 100%.
They're dentaling, they're selling, they're doing all that stuff.
Yep.
And what happens is as they grow, they start off by doing it 30, 40 hours a week.
Yes.
And then as they grow, it's 50 hours a week and 60 hours a week and 70 hours a week. And
then they burn out.
Well, and many of them are good at math. So they understand that there's only so many hours.
Yep.
So then, you know, you have to add people. And one of the biggest objections that I see when you're adding people is, well, they can't do it as good as me.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the development comes in. So if you want to keep the quality in your practice, you've got to develop those people. So, but it's hard to find a time. And it's not just your time, it's their time as well.
Yes.
People you're developing. The strategy that I incorporate, and I really always have, is make the development part of the job. You know, you don't have to give them a lecture.
No.
You don't have to send them to classes. I mean, you know, sometimes you do that stuff in the more technical professions, but ideally what you're doing is try this out when you're working in your job today. That conversation might take 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay.
And then they can take it and they can incorporate it in their work so that it's not incremental time added to it.
What I'm hearing you say, perhaps in the subtext as well, is understanding the importance of it as well. Because you're right when you say the 50, 60 hours a week. What I sometimes express with dentists is they're doing dentistry by day and trying to run the business by night. And that only works for so long before something gives. And usually what gives is the health and well-being of the person working 50, 60 hours a week. And then the people who wear the effects of that are those people around them, sometimes family, sometimes team. And that leads to unhappy work environments, culture problems, staff turnover, and so the cycle perpetuates. So I wanted to just talk to you a little bit about self-leadership first as we go through this leadership gap, because I know that if I'm going to grow my business, the business growth kind of comes after I develop myself, after I develop my skills. So what sort of thoughts do you have around self-leadership? How do leaders get better within themselves so that they can be better for others?
So it starts with mindset.
Yep.
The abilities of your team are limited by your own abilities. Do not grow yourself. You cannot grow your team beyond where you already are.
100%.
And, you know, to put it simpler, and I'm borrowing this from somebody I talked to, but, you know, when you get on an airplane, what's the first thing they tell you? Put your own mask on first, right? And it's the same. And so you have to take that time and grow yourself.
Yep.
You know, it doesn't have to be, you know, you go away for 2 weeks to a conference.
No.
You can grow yourself a little bit each day. You can read books. You can talk to people. You can stretch yourself in your job. You can try new things. A lot of growth comes from experimentation. It's shifting the mindset that way, but it's also understanding that you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. So oftentimes as leaders, we have that belief, right, that we're leaders because we are the smartest person in the room on everything. And, you know, first of all, it's not true. I was just coaching somebody today, and he says, you know, the problem is I can just do everything better. I'm like, well, first of all, no, you can't.
Yeah.
But secondly, it doesn't matter. So the mindset is you have to be willing to learn from those around you, including those underneath you, because there's some things they know that you don't.
I think you touched on a really important point, Wade. And it's funny. There's two or three things. My background as a young dentist was in the military, and that style of leadership was whoever had the most stripes was the leader. Not necessarily whether they were the best leader or not, but it was positional leadership, you know, based on rank and seniority and so on. I think a lot of us are guilty of thinking that because we're bright and intelligent in one area or element of our lives, that translates to every element of our lives. And what I'm hearing you say is that's just not true. It's about surrounding yourself with the right people and being open, right?
Yeah, it really is. And understanding that they're not going to think any less of you because they're giving you advice. What
I'd love to ask you about is, I think intellectually some people will really appreciate and understand that. They'll go, yeah, sure, I'll surround myself with the smartest people, da-da-da-da-da. Yeah, that's great. And yet they're not always that approachable or receptive to hearing what other people have to say. They get it intellectually, but emotionally the conversations get shut down. How do you create that environment or that team culture where you're encouraging others to share their expertise, even if they are positionally at least lower, in inverted commas, down the organizational chart.
So what will happen is the people lower in your organization aren't going to volunteer it.
Yeah.
Right. And so this comes back to self-leadership at the top.
Yeah.
So that leader has to create that safe space. And so if they are not there emotionally, they should pretend.
Yeah. Okay.
They need to have their mind open, right?
Yep.
And this is something that I struggled with when I was younger. I emotionally wasn't there, but you know what? I'm like, I'll humor it. And then the intellectual part takes over because somebody tells me something I didn't know.
Yeah.
That I learned, right? So all I had to do was kind of get past that barrier, and that kind of created the dialogue that I needed to open my mind.
Hey there, I really hope you enjoyed that episode from the summer series. I hope you took some great notes, but most importantly, I hope you apply what you learned as a result of listening to the guests on the show. Now, if you want to set up your next 12 months to be the most successful ever, then I'm going to encourage you to think about putting a strategic plan in place. No matter what your definition of success is, it's going to be important that you have a plan. So whether you want to increase your revenue, whether you want to enhance your profitability, whether you want to have more free time for better work-life balance, maybe you want to have fuller appointment books with better marketing, or maybe it's about having your team perform at a higher level than ever before so that your experiences for your patients are better, you're able to delegate more effectively. Whatever it is for you, having the right plan in place is going to be really critical. One of the things that we know at Savvy is that the stages of growth of a business are absolutely predictable. And what that means is that the challenges encountered at any particular level of growth are really predictable, as are the solutions. We've worked with literally hundreds, if not thousands of practices over the years, and we've been able to help them achieve their business goals, their personal goals, and everything in between. But it all starts with having the right plan in place. One of the skills that we've developed is the ability to identify very clearly what the right next thing is to focus on. And so as you embark on the next 12 months, it's going to be really important that you identify what the right next thing is for you. Yeah, and that's going to depend on where you are now and what your goals and ambitions are as well. And once you've identified what the right next thing or things are, it's important to identify, well, what are the potential obstacles? What are the things that could derail us? And then, of course, have a mitigation plan around that so that as you progress through the year, you can make that progress, hit those goals, achieve the milestones that are important to you. And as I said, make sure that this 12 months is the most successful ever. Now, if you would like a hand putting that plan together, could I encourage you to book a practice growth call with one of our team? All you need to do is head across to savvydentist.com/growth call. One of our team will reach out to you and book that time. Now, during that call, they're going to be asking you some questions about what's the current state of play in your practice, what your goals and ambitions are for the next 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, and so on, so that they can align your thinking, align your resources to achieving not just the 1 year goals, but the 3 year, the 5 year, and the 10 year goals as well, so that you're setting yourself up for a fantastic future. As I said, whether it's around revenue growth, profit growth, leverage for greater free time, whatever it might be for you, that's really, really important, because ultimately what we want to create is a practice and a life that you love. And getting that right plan in place is a really critical and essential first step for that. So all you need to do is head across to savvydentist.com/growth call and book that time. And we look forward to talking to you very, very shortly. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast. For more episodes, go to drjessiegreen.com/savvydentist. And to discover how to build a high-performance dental practice, visit drjessiegreen.com and download the free report.